They thought it was just another power trip. They thought they could judge a book by its cover and get away with it. When two brothers in hoodies were blocked from boarding their first-class flight, the gate staff sneered, mocked them, and called security. But they made one fatal mistake. They didn't check who was really paying for those seats. Those weren't just passengers. They were the sons of the man who owned the planes. One phone call was about to ground an entire airport, and the karma that followed wasn't just satisfying. It was absolutely brutal. Watch until the end to see the arrogance shatter. The automatic sliding doors of Denver International Airport hissed open at 6:43 on a Tuesday morning, allowing a gust of November wind to chase two young men into the terminal. Marcus and Jordan Hayes stepped onto the polished terrazzo floor, shaking off the mountain chill that clung to their jackets like static. To the casual observer, and specifically to the eyes trained to scan departure halls for threats, vagrants, or anything that didn't fit the carefully curated image of premium travel, they looked like problems waiting to happen. Marcus, the older of the two at 26, wore a vintage oversized gray hoodie that bore the faded logo of a 90s hip-hop tour most people wouldn't recognize. The fabric was Loro Piana cashmere, $2,400 retail, but it looked like something pulled from a Goodwill bin. His cargo pants sagged just enough to reveal limited edition sneakers that cost more than most people's monthly rent. A black beanie sat low over his hair, and his hands were buried in his pockets as he moved through the pre-dawn chaos with the easy confidence of someone who'd navigated 1,000 airports. Jordan, barely 22, mirrored his brother's aesthetic in a monochromatic tracksuit that screamed streetwear to anyone under 30 and screamed something else entirely to anyone over 50. Dark sunglasses perched on his nose despite the fact that the sun hadn't fully risen yet. Headphones dangled around his neck, and his phone's screen, cracked in a spiderweb pattern across the corner, was already in his hand, thumb scrolling through notifications. They carried no luggage, just a single battered leather duffel bag slung carelessly over Marcus's shoulder, the kind that looked like it had seen a dozen countries, but probably cost more than a used car. The air inside smelled of burnt coffee, industrial sanitizer, and the particular brand of stress that only airports can generate. Thanksgiving week was days away, and the terminal buzzed with the manic energy of thousands of people trying to get somewhere before the holiday gridlock set in. Marcus glanced at his brother. Jordan's jaw was tight, the way it always got when he was trying not to say something. "Flight leaves in 40 minutes. You want food, or are we heading straight to the lounge?" Jordan checked his phone again, the cracked screen reflecting the overhead fluorescence. "Lounge. I need that sparkling water they only have in the Diamond Suite. Plus, I'm not dealing with the food court line." Marcus nodded. They bypassed the snaking queues at economy check-in, cutting through the crowd with the kind of spatial awareness that came from years of travel. The main terminal was a circus. Families juggling strollers, business travelers barking into Bluetooth earpieces, college kids sprawled across gate seating like they were camping. But as they moved toward the far end of Concourse B, the noise began to fade. The carpet grew thicker, the lighting softer. The chaos gave way to something quieter, more controlled. The signage above the counter gleamed in brushed steel. Horizon Royal Airlines, first class and diamond medallion check-in. This was the sanctuary, the VIP zone, the place where money bought silence, space, and the illusion that flying was still glamorous. Behind the high marble counter stood 3 agents in crisp navy uniforms with gold piping that caught the light like military dress blues. They were the gatekeepers of luxury, trained to smile at wealth and filter out anyone who didn't belong. As Marcus and Jordan approached, the atmosphere shifted. It was subtle, a fraction of a second's hesitation, a tightening around the eyes, but it was there. The agent in the center, whose name tag read Patricia Moore, looked up from her computer screen. She was in her late 40s, hair sprayed into a helmet of blonde immobility. and her eyes moved from the brothers' faces to their clothes to the scuffed duffel bag in a single sweeping assessment that took less than a heartbeat. She didn't smile. She didn't offer the standard greeting that every other passenger had received in the last hour. Instead, her fingers moved to her keyboard, typing something sharp and deliberate, her gaze flicking toward the security guard stationed near the luggage scales. "Can I help you?" The words were technically a question, but the tone was a challenge. It was the voice of someone who had already decided the answer was no. Marcus stopped at the counter, resting his forearm on the polished marble. He smiled, a genuine, tired smile that didn't quite reach his eyes because it was 6:45 in the morning and he'd been awake since 4. Checking in for flight RH4004 to London. "We're running a little behind, but we're carry-on only, so it should be quick." Patricia stared at him, not at his face but at the frayed cuffs of his hoodie, at the beanie, at Jordan's sunglasses which hadn't been removed, despite the fact that they were indoors and the sun was barely cresting the Rockies. Her eyes narrowed. "This is the first-class line." The statement hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus's smile didn't waver. "We know." Jordan stepped up beside his brother, pulling his sunglasses down just far enough to reveal eyes that were sharp and unimpressed. "We're in the right place." Patricia crossed her arms and the gold wings pinned to her lapel caught the harsh fluorescent light. The gesture was small, but it conveyed everything: skepticism, authority, and a barely concealed disdain. "I seriously doubt that. Tickets, please." Marcus pulled out his phone. No paper boarding pass, no printed confirmation. Just a QR code on the Horizon Royal Black Tier app, an interface that was only available to the top 0.1% of travelers, the kind of membership that came with 24/7 concierge service, complimentary upgrades, and access to lounges that most passengers didn't even know existed. He held the screen out toward the scanner. Patricia didn't move. She didn't reach for the device. She didn't even glance at the screen. Her eyes stayed locked on Marcus, and her voice dropped into the carefully measured cadence of someone who was used to being obeyed. "Sir, I need to see identification and proof of purchase. And frankly, given the way you're dressed, I'm going to need you to weigh that bag. We have strict policies for the Diamond Lounge." Marcus's hand didn't lower. The phone stayed extended, QR code glowing faintly in the overhead light. "Since when?" "I flew through here last week in sweatpants." "Policy changed?" Patricia's smile was thin and sharp. "Policy is always evolving, sir. And right now the policy is that I need to verify your credentials before I can process you." Behind the brothers, a man in a bespoke suit cleared his throat. He was 50-ish, salt and pepper hair, Rolex catching the light as he checked the time with the impatience of someone who believed his schedule mattered more than anyone else's. "Is there a problem here?" The question wasn't directed at Marcus or Jordan, it was directed at Patricia, and the shift in her demeanor was immediate. The sneer melted into a practiced beam of customer service excellence. "So sorry, Mr. Hayes. Just clearing up some confusion. I'll be with you in one moment." She turned back to the brothers and the warmth evaporated. "Look, boys, I'm going to save us all some time. You're clearly looking for a viral moment or you're lost. Either way, this isn't the line for you. Economy check-in is back that way, past the Starbucks. You can't miss it. It's the one with the long line." Jordan's hand tightened around his phone. His voice dropped an octave, low and controlled. "Scan the code, Patricia." Her eyes flashed. "I will not. I am not going to let you hold up my line while you try to scam a free upgrade or whatever game this is. You are not flying first class. Not on my shift. Now move before I call security." Marcus looked at her. Really looked at her. Memorizing her face, the way her mouth twisted when she said the word boys, the way her fingers hovered over the keyboard like she was already typing up the incident report. The way she glanced at the security guard again, a silent signal passing between them. You're making a mistake. Patricia leaned forward, her voice dropping to a hiss that only the brothers could hear. The only mistake was you thinking you could walk in here like you own the place. Security. The word cut through the quiet hum of the first-class zone like a gunshot. The security guard, a burly man named Kyle Torres with a buzz cut and a uniform 2 sizes too tight, had been waiting for this. The boredom of the airport beat was suffocating, and the chance to exert authority was a welcome reprieve. He lumbered over, positioning himself between the brothers and the counter, effectively blocking them from the check-in computers. Is there an issue, Patricia? His hand rested on his belt, fingers drumming near the taser holster in a gesture that was meant to intimidate. Patricia straightened, her voice loud enough now to carry to the handful of business travelers waiting behind the brothers. These two represent a security concern. They're refusing to leave the first-class zone. They have no valid credentials that I've been able to verify, and they're becoming aggressive. Jordan laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that scraped against the air. Aggressive? We're standing here holding a phone. Torres put a hand on Jordan's chest. Not a shove, just pressure. A warning. Sir, step back. That was the spark. Jordan didn't shove back, but he didn't move either. He looked down at the hand pressed against his sternum, then back up at Torres with eyes that had gone very, very cold. Don't touch me. Torres's jaw tightened. I said step back. The shove came harder this time, enough force that Jordan stumbled backward a step, his shoulder colliding with Marcus. The scuffed leather duffel slipped from Marcus's grip and hit the floor with a heavy thud that echoed across the polished terrazzo. Whoa, whoa. Marcus stepped between them, hands raised, palms open in the universal gesture of de-escalation. We're leaving the counter. Relax. He turned to Patricia, and his voice was calm but carried an edge that hadn't been there before. You won't scan the ticket. Fine. We'll go to the gate. We have digital passes. We don't need to check bags. Patricia's fingers were already flying across her keyboard, triumph glittering in her eyes like she'd just won a chess match. I'm flagging your reservation. You won't get through TSA. I'm marking you as disruptive passengers. Marcus paused. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment something passed across his face that might have been pity. You really want to do that, Patricia? You want to mark us as disruptive? Her finger hovered over the enter key for half a heartbeat, then she slammed it down with a flourish that was almost theatrical. Watch me. Get out of my airport. Marcus grabbed the duffel. He grabbed Jordan's arm before his brother could say something that would make everything worse. Let's go. You can't be serious. Jordan's voice was low, dangerous. We call Dad right now. We end her. Not yet. Marcus's jaw was set, his eyes fixed on the exit. Let her dig the hole deeper. I want to see how far this goes. I want to see if the whole system is this rotten. They walked away from the counter, and the weight of 300 eyes followed them. Passengers whispered. Phones came out. Somewhere behind them, Patricia was already spinning the story to Mr. Hayes, the man in the suit, her voice sweet and apologetic as she explained the unfortunate delay caused by those two trying to cause a scene. The TSA pre-check line was supposed to be fast, streamlined. For trusted travelers who'd paid for the privilege of keeping their shoes on and their laptops in their bags. Marcus and Jordan approached the automated kiosk, scanning their phones with the practiced efficiency of people who flew twice a month. The light should have turned green. It should have beeped and opened the lane and let them through. It turned red. A harsh, angry red that made the TSA agent behind the desk look up with a frown. He was young, mid-20s maybe, with the kind of face that suggested he'd rather be literally anywhere else. His name tag read Aaron Washington, and he waved them over to a side desk with a resigned sigh. Boarding pass error. He squinted at his screen, then looked up at Marcus and Jordan with an expression that was equal parts confusion and concern. Says here you were denied boarding. Aggressive behavior. What did you guys do? Marcus leaned in, his voice quiet but firm. Look at the names on the tickets. Aaron's eyes dropped back to the screen. Marcus Hayes. Jordan Hayes. He scrolled down and his eyebrows climbed toward his hairline as he registered the carrier code. HRVIP00001. His gaze flicked to the status field. Chairman priority. Aaron went very still. His eyes moved from the screen to Marcus's face, then to Jordan's, then back to the screen like he was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't make sense. He looked over his shoulder, back toward the first-class counter where Patricia was visible through the glass partition, already attending to the next passenger with a smile that hadn't been offered to the brothers. Wait, Aaron's voice dropped to a whisper. Are you, as in Lawrence Hayes? Marcus finished the sentence, his tone conversational. Yeah, the guy who signed the check for the new body scanners you just installed last month. Aaron's face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Shock, disbelief, and then something that looked a lot like vindication. The lady at the counter, Patricia, she put a disruptive tag on Lawrence Hayes's kids. Jordan adjusted his sunglasses, his voice dry. She didn't like our hoodies. Aaron shook his head slowly, a mix of disbelief and something that might have been respect flickering across his features. He typed in a manual override code, fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. I didn't see any aggression. You guys are good. Have a safe flight. He paused, then added, almost as an afterthought. And I'm sorry about that. Marcus's expression didn't change. Not your fault, but do me a favor. Keep that disruptive note on file. I want the record to show she tried to stop us. Aaron's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. You got it. They cleared security without another word. The X-ray machines hummed, the metal detectors beeped, business as usual. But as they walked through the sterile corridor toward Concourse B, the adrenaline that had been coiling in Marcus's chest began to shift into something colder, something sharper. It wasn't just about the inconvenience. It wasn't even about the humiliation, though that stung in a way that was hard to articulate. It was the casual cruelty of it, the assumption, the certainty in Patricia's eyes that she was right, that they didn't belong, that people who looked like them in clothes like theirs couldn't possibly have earned the right to sit in the front of the plane. And the worst part? She'd done it before. Marcus could see it in the efficiency of her movements, the practiced way she'd dismissed them, the ease with which she'd summoned security. This wasn't a mistake, this was a pattern. Jordan walked beside him in silence, jaw tight, hands shoved deep in his pockets. His sunglasses were still on, but Marcus could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his brother's breathing had gone shallow and controlled. You good? Jordan didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough. I wanted to hit him. When that guard put his hands on me, I wanted to drop him. I know, but you didn't let me, because that's what they wanted. Marcus's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. They wanted us to react. They wanted the excuse, and if we'd given it to them, we'd be in handcuffs right now, not walking to our gate. Jordan was quiet for a long moment. Then, you think Dad knows about people like her? Marcus thought about his father, about Victor Hayes, who'd built a $12 billion empire from nothing, who'd bought a controlling stake in Horizon Royal Airlines 3 years ago specifically because he'd been treated like garbage by the previous ownership, who'd told his sons 1,000 times that the world would judge them before they opened their mouths, and that the only way to fight it was to be better, smarter, and more patient than anyone expected. Yeah, he knows. That's why he warned us. They reached Gate B-17 at 7:14. The flight to London was scheduled to depart at 7:50 and the waiting area was already packed. 300 passengers, maybe more, crammed into a space designed for 200. Families with strollers. Business travelers tapping furiously on laptops. A group of college students sprawled across the floor, backpacks serving as makeshift pillows. And standing at the podium, microphone in hand, was Patricia Moore. She'd left the check-in counter. She'd walked the entire length of the terminal to ensure they didn't get on this plane. Marcus stopped walking. Jordan, half a step ahead, froze when he realized his brother wasn't beside him anymore. No way. Marcus's eyes were locked on Patricia. She was talking to another gate agent, a younger woman whose name tag read Jennifer. The two of them were huddled close, Patricia gesturing with her hands. Her expression animated in a way that suggested she was telling a story. Probably the story of the two troublemakers who'd tried to scam their way into first class, and how she'd heroically stopped them. Jennifer nodded along, glancing toward the waiting passengers with the wary expression of someone who'd been told to watch for a threat. Marcus felt Jordan tense beside him, felt the coiled energy of his brother's anger ready to snap. "Wait!" Jordan turned and his voice was tight. "For what? She's already here. She's going to do it again. I know, but let her. Let her make it worse. The more she does, the harder she falls." They approached the gate, slowly, deliberately, and the moment Patricia saw them, her entire body went rigid. She grabbed the microphone from the podium and her voice, amplified and sharp, cut through the low hum of conversation like a blade. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a security situation. Boarding will be delayed while we remove 2 individuals who have breached security protocols." The crowd groaned, heads turned, phones came out. A teenage boy near the window, Brandon Miller, though Marcus wouldn't learn his name until later, pulled out his phone and opened TikTok. He hit the live button without thinking twice. 200 viewers, then 500, then 1,000. We didn't breach anything. Marcus kept his voice calm, his hands visible, his posture non-threatening. The cameras were already rolling, and he knew every word, every gesture would be dissected later. "TSA cleared us. We have valid tickets." Patricia's smile was thin and sharp, the kind of expression that belonged on someone who just won an argument they didn't deserve to win. "I am the gate lead. I have final say on who boards this aircraft, and I say you two are a threat to the safety of this flight. You are aggressive, you are non-compliant, and frankly, you don't belong in first class." Jordan stepped forward, and his voice was loud enough to carry across the waiting area. "Why? Why don't we belong?" Patricia's mask slipped, just for a second. But it was enough. Her lips curled, and the word came out with a venom that was impossible to miss. "Because first class is for professionals, not for thugs." The word hung in the air. The crowd went silent. Brandon's live stream count hit 5,000 viewers. "Thugs." Marcus repeated the word slowly, tasting it. "You heard me." Patricia pointed toward the jet bridge door, her hand shaking slightly now, either from adrenaline or the realization that she'd just said something she couldn't take back. "Kyle, get them out of here. Call airport police. I want them arrested for trespassing." Kyle Torres reappeared, this time flanked by 2 actual police officers. They looked tired, midway through a long shift probably, and their expressions suggested they'd rather be dealing with literally anything else. The older of the two, whose badge read Officer Miller, approached with his hands on his belt. "These the guys?" Patricia's voice was shrill now, performative in a way that suggested she was playing to an audience. "Yes. They threatened me at the counter. They pushed past security, and now they're refusing to leave the gate area. They're terrifying the passengers." Miller looked at Marcus and Jordan. They were standing still, hands visible, expressions calm. The crowd wasn't terrified, they were intrigued. Phones were up, cameras were rolling. This was going to be online in minutes. "Sir," Miller's voice was professional but tired. "I need you to come with us. We have tickets." Marcus didn't raise his voice. We just want to board our flight. The airline has the right to refuse service. Miller recited the line like he'd said it 1,000 times before. If they want you off, you're off. Don't make this hard. Marcus reached slowly into his pocket. Kyle's hand flew to his taser. Hands! Marcus froze. I'm getting my phone. I need to make one call. Then if you still want us to leave, we'll leave. But I promise you, if we leave, this plane doesn't take off. Patricia laughed. It was a shrill, mocking sound that echoed across the gate area. Who are you going to call? Your parole officer? This plane is a $70 million machine, honey. You think you can stop it? Marcus pulled out his phone. Yeah, I do. He dialed. Put it on speaker. The phone rang once, twice. Then a voice, deep, commanding, with the kind of authority that didn't need to be loud to be heard, filled the silence. Marcus, you boys in London yet? Marcus looked directly at Patricia as he answered. No, Dad. We're in Denver. Gate B-17. The gate lead, Patricia Moore, just called us thugs and is having the police arrest us for trespassing. There was a silence on the other end of the line. A silence so heavy it felt like the air pressure in the terminal dropped. She did what? She denied boarding. Said we don't belong in first class. Is the phone on speaker, son? Yes, sir. Put her on. Patricia's face had gone from flushed to pale in the span of a heartbeat. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at the phone like it was a live grenade. Marcus held it out toward her. It's for you. Patricia leaned toward the device, her voice shaking now. Listen, whoever this is, your sons are causing a scene and... The voice on the phone cut her off like a guillotine. This is Victor Hayes, CEO of Apex Global Holdings. I own a 78% controlling stake in Horizon Royal Airlines. I own the plane you're standing in front of. I own the contract for the uniform you're wearing. Who am I speaking to? The name Victor Hayes didn't just ring a bell in the aviation industry. It tolled like a cathedral gong in the middle of a funeral, impossible to ignore and heavy with consequences. For anyone who'd spent more than 5 minutes in corporate air travel, that name carried weight that could crush careers with a single phone call. Patricia stared at the device in Marcus's hand, as if it had suddenly transformed into a venomous snake. Her throat clicked audibly in the silence that followed Victor's question, and when she finally managed to speak, the words came out strangled. I didn't, sir. I was just following protocol. Security protocols state that... Protocol. Victor's voice crackled through the phone speaker, amplified by the hush that had fallen over the 300 passengers packed into the gate area. Does your protocol dictate that you profile 2 paying customers based on their clothing? Does it suggest you call armed police on the sons of the chairman of the board? Officer Miller, who had been reaching for his handcuffs moments earlier, took a slow, deliberate step away from the brothers. He looked at his partner, then at the phone, then at the name displayed on Marcus's screen. His face had gone the color of old paper. Mr. Hayes. Miller's voice had shifted from authoritative to respectful in the span of 3 seconds. This is Officer Miller, Denver PD. We were told there was a disturbance. Officer Miller, were you told the truth? Victor's tone was calm, but there was ice underneath. Have my sons assaulted anyone? Have they destroyed property? Have they done anything other than attempt to board a flight they purchased? Miller glanced at Marcus and Jordan, both standing with their hands visible, posture relaxed despite the tension crackling through the air. No, sir. They've been compliant. Then why are you there? We were called by the gate lead, sir. She reported a trespass. There is no trespass, officer. They have tickets. I purchased those tickets through the corporate allocation 6 weeks ago. Victor paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of someone who was used to giving orders and having them followed without question. I would appreciate it if you stayed right where you are. not to arrest my sons, but to ensure their safety until my station manager arrives. Can you do that for me? Yes, sir. Miller turned to Kyle Torres, the security guard who still had his hand hovering near his taser. Holster that. Stand down. Now. Kyle looked confused, his gaze bouncing between Patricia and the uniformed officer. But she said, I said stand down. Miller's voice had regained some of its authority, but it was directed at the wrong target now. Patricia was shaking. Mascara had started to smudge at the corners of her eyes, though she hadn't cried yet. The terror was still too fresh for tears. She looked at the line of passengers, the high-value clients she'd been trying to impress with her vigilant protection of the premium cabin. They weren't impressed. They were filming. Mr. Hayes, her voice cracked on the name. I have children, a mortgage. I didn't know they were. You didn't know because you didn't ask. You didn't scan their boarding passes. You didn't verify their credentials. You made an assumption based on how they looked, and then you weaponized the police to enforce your prejudice. Victor's voice dropped lower, and somehow that made it more terrifying. Tell me, Patricia, how many other passengers have you treated this way? The question hung in the air like a noose before Patricia could answer, before she could formulate any defense that wouldn't immediately incriminate her further. The jet bridge door swung open with a pneumatic hiss. Captain Robert Garrison stepped through, his silver hair catching the fluorescent lights, 4 stripes gleaming on his epaulets. He had his cap tucked under one arm and an expression of profound irritation etched into the lines around his mouth. Patricia, what is the holdup? We missed our departure slot. Tower is asking why we haven't pushed back. The load sheet says we're waiting on 2 VIPs, but the door's still open and... He stopped mid-sentence when he saw the tableau. Patricia pale and shaking, 2 police officers flanking Marcus and Jordan, Kyle standing uselessly to one side, and 300 passengers watching with the rapt attention usually reserved for reality television. What the hell is going on? Patricia pointed a trembling finger at the brothers. Captain, I denied them boarding. Security risk. But his father is on the phone and... Garrison's eyes swept over Marcus and Jordan with the kind of cursory assessment that took less than a second and reached a conclusion that would have taken a reasonable person several minutes to arrive at. He saw the hoodies, the casual clothes, the lack of visible luggage. He saw 2 young black men who didn't fit his mental image of what first-class passengers should look like. Who's on the phone? Marcus held up the device. My father, Victor Hayes. Garrison's expression didn't change. He was a man who'd spent 32 years flying commercial aircraft, who'd landed planes in thunderstorms and navigated political nightmares in the cockpit, and he wasn't about to be intimidated by a name on a phone screen. I don't care if it's the president. On my aircraft, I decide who fly, and if my gate lead says you're a problem, that's good enough for me. He reached for the phone and Marcus let him take it. Garrison brought it to his ear, turning slightly away from the crowd as if that would make the conversation private. This is Captain Garrison, Flight RH-4004. To whom am I speaking? Victor's voice was quiet enough that the passengers couldn't hear the words, but they could see Garrison's face, could see the moment his irritation shifted to confusion, then to something that looked a lot like fear. Sir, we have 300 souls on board. If we don't depart in the next 15 minutes, we'll be delayed for hours due to the weather front moving in over... He stopped, listened. The color drained from his face in stages, starting at his forehead and working down to his neck. Sir, that's a logistical nightmare. We have connecting flights. We have passengers who... He stopped again. When he spoke next, his voice had lost all its authority. Understood, sir. Garrison handed the phone back to Marcus with a hand that wasn't quite steady. He turned to Patricia, and the look he gave her wasn't anger. It was something worse, disappointment mixed with the dawning realization that she'd just destroyed both their careers. You have no idea what you've done. He picked up the PA microphone, and his voice, amplified and carrying the weight of 32 years of command, filled the gate area. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Garrison. I regret to inform you that flight RH4004 to London has been cancelled by direct order of the chairman of Horizon Royal Airlines. The reaction was instantaneous and explosive. 300 voices erupted in a cacophony of disbelief, rage, and confusion. A woman in a fur coat rushed the podium, her face twisted with fury. Cancelled? You can't cancel it. I have a wedding in London tomorrow, mister. Hayes, the businessman who'd been waiting behind Marcus and Jordan at the check-in counter, shoved his way forward. I paid $12,000 for this ticket. This is absurd. A young mother clutching a toddler started crying. We have family waiting. We planned this for months. Garrison stood at the podium, microphone in hand, and said nothing. There was nothing to say. The plane wasn't going anywhere, and everyone in the terminal was about to learn why. Brandon Miller, the teenager who'd started streaming on TikTok, watched his viewer count explode. 5,000 had become 50,000. 50,000 was climbing toward 100,000. The algorithm had picked up the stream and was pushing it to everyone in the Denver metro area, then across Colorado, then nationwide. People were sharing it in real time, captioning it with hashtags that were already starting to trend. Patricia shrank back against the wall, trying to make herself invisible as the crowd she'd tried to protect from the supposed threat of Marcus and Jordan turned their fury toward her. Someone shouted her name. Someone else demanded to know what she'd done. Kyle Torres, who'd been so eager to escalate the situation 15 minutes earlier, had disappeared into the crowd, leaving Patricia to face the consequences alone. The jet bridge door opened again, and this time it wasn't a pilot or a flight attendant. Andrew Foster, the station manager for Denver, came sprinting down the concourse like his life depended on it. He was short, round, and sweating profusely despite the air conditioning. His tie was askew, and his shirt had come partially untucked from his belt. He'd received a code black notification on his pager, a signal reserved for crashes, terrorist threats, or situations that required immediate executive intervention. He'd been on the other side of the terminal dealing with a baggage issue when the alert came through. He'd run the entire length of Concourse B, dodging travelers and strollers and luggage carts, his heart hammering in his chest and his mind racing through every possible catastrophe that could warrant a code black. He'd expected fire. He'd expected a medical emergency. He'd expected anything except what he found when he reached Gate B-17. Mr. Hayes. Foster skidded to a halt in front of Marcus and Jordan, ignoring Patricia completely, ignoring the police officers, ignoring everyone except the two young men in hoodies who were standing calmly in the center of a hurricane. I am so sorry. I was on the other side of the terminal. I came as soon as I got the notification. Marcus looked at him with an expression that gave nothing away. Put my father on. Foster took the phone with both hands, like it was a sacred object that might shatter if handled roughly. Mr. Chairman, I'm here. I'm taking control of the situation. Victor's voice was clear enough that Marcus could hear it even though the phone wasn't on speaker anymore. Andrew, you're not taking control fast enough. I want Patricia Moore removed from the floor immediately. Badge confiscated, escorted from the building, and I want it done in front of every passenger who witnessed her behavior. Foster turned to Patricia, and his face had gone from panic to purple with rage. His hands were shaking as he reached for her. Give me your badge, now! Patricia's voice came out as a whisper. Andrew, please, I have a daughter. A mortgage. I was just following the dress code policy. They looked. There is no dress code policy for revenue tickets. Foster's voice cracked, and several passengers near the front of the crowd flinched at the volume. We went over this in the third quarter operational memo. Money is money. I don't care if they're wearing tuxedos or trash bags. If they paid for the seat, they get the seat. He snatched the lanyard from around her neck. nearly pulling her forward in the process. The badge, blue and gold with her photo and employee number, dangled from his fist like a trophy. Victor's voice came through the phone again, loud enough now that people nearby could hear. "Andrew, that's step 1. Here's step 2. Pull Patricia's personnel file. I want every incident report she's filed in the last 6 years, every denied boarding, every security call, every complaint. If there's a pattern, and I suspect there is, I'm holding you personally accountable for not catching it sooner. We'll do a full audit, sir, I promise. Every file, every interaction, every—" "You're not hearing me, Andrew." Victor's voice sharpened. "I don't want just an audit. I want a shutdown. If the staff at Denver feel comfortable profiling the owners of the company, imagine what they do to passengers who don't have recourse. The single mother trying to get home, the student on a budget, the veteran flying to a reunion." Foster's face had gone from purple to gray. He looked like he was going to be sick round all outbound Horizon Royal flights from Denver. 4-hour operational halt, sir, that's 20 flights, that's thousands of passengers. The ripple effect across the network will cost millions in rebooking, hotels, compensation. I don't care about the money. I care about the message. Victor's voice was steel. Ground them. Tell the passengers why. Tell them that Horizon Royal is conducting an emergency review of personnel standards and bias training. Make it public. Make it hurt. "Yes, sir." Foster's voice was barely audible. "And Andrew, one more thing. I'm sending the corporate jet for my sons. It'll be there in 90 minutes. Make sure they get to the FBO without any further harassment. Can you manage that?" "Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir." The call ended. Foster lowered the phone slowly, staring at the device like it had just delivered his execution order. Around him, the crowd was still shouting, demanding answers, waving tickets and boarding passes and threatening lawsuits. But Foster wasn't looking at them. He was looking at Patricia, who had collapsed onto a chair near the gate desk, her face buried in her hands. Jordan leaned toward Marcus, his voice low enough that only his brother could hear. "Dad really just grounded 20 flights because of us?" "Not because of us. Because of her. And everyone like her who thought they could get away with it." A ripple went through the crowd as people started checking their phones, pulling up the Horizon Royal app and seeing the cascade of red cancellation notices flooding their screens. Flights to Chicago, to Atlanta, to Phoenix, to Seattle, all grounded, all delayed indefinitely pending operational review. The fury that had been directed at Patricia began to diffuse, replaced by a confused murmur as passengers tried to understand what was happening. A few people near the front had overheard Victor's orders. They were already whispering to their neighbors, and the information spread like wildfire. She called them thugs. She refused to scan their tickets. She called the cops on the chairman's kids. This is all because of her? Mr. Hayes, the businessman in the suit who'd complained about his $12,000 ticket, pushed his way through the crowd until he was standing in front of Marcus and Jordan. His Rolex caught the light as he extended a hand, and his expression had shifted from irritation to something that looked like shame. "Gentlemen, I need to apologize. When I saw the delay at the counter, I assumed—" "You assumed we were the problem." Marcus didn't take the offered hand. Everyone did. Hayes lowered his arm, nodding slowly. "You're right, I did, and I was wrong. I was." He pulled a business card from his wallet, holding it out between 2 fingers. "I run a private equity firm. I'd like to make this right. If you or your father ever have a charitable initiative, a foundation, anything that needs funding, I want to contribute." Marcus took the card, glanced at it, then slipped it into his pocket. "We're starting something for kids who look like us. Kids who want careers in aviation but get stopped at every gate. Pilot training, engineering scholarships, that kind of thing." Hayes nodded, and there was genuine contrition in his eyes now. "Put me down for 100,000 and I'll match whatever your father contributes, up to $1 million. We'll have our office contact you." Hayes stepped back, melting into the crowd, and Marcus caught Jordan's eye. His brother was watching the entire scene unfold with an expression that oscillated between vindication and exhaustion. "You good?" Jordan shook his head slowly. "I'm tired. I wanted to hit someone back there. And I hate that I wanted that. But you didn't. Only because you stopped me. That's what brothers do." The crowd was beginning to disperse now. Passengers heading toward customer service desks to rebook flights or find hotels or figure out how to salvage travel plans that had just been incinerated. Some cast curious glances at Marcus and Jordan as they passed. A few nodded. One woman, older, black, carrying a worn Bible in one hand, paused long enough to touch Marcus's shoulder. "Thank you." Her voice was soft but steady, for not backing down. Then she was gone, disappearing into the flow of travelers, and Marcus was left standing in the wreckage of Patricia Moore's career, wondering if anything would actually change or if this was just a temporary disruption in a system designed to grind people down. Officer Miller approached, and his expression was carefully neutral. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. We should have asked more questions before we showed up. You were doing your job. My job is to protect people, not to be a weapon for someone's prejudice." Miller glanced toward Patricia, who was still slumped in the chair, Jennifer hovering nearby but keeping a careful distance. "She's done. You know that, right?" "I know. And for what it's worth," Miller hesitated, then continued, "I've seen her do this before. Different passengers, same script. She always got away with it because the people she targeted didn't have the resources to fight back." "How many times?" Miller shrugged. "Enough that I should have said something. I didn't. That's on me." He walked away before Marcus could respond, rejoining his partner near the security checkpoint. Kyle Torres was nowhere to be seen. He'd vanished the moment Victor's name had been spoken, and Marcus suspected he wouldn't be coming back. Foster was on his phone now, barking orders to someone on the other end of the line. "Yes, ground them. All of them. I don't care about the logistics. Find hotels, issue vouchers, do whatever it takes, and get me every file on Patricia Moore going back 6 years. Personnel reviews, incident reports, passenger complaints, all of it." He lowered the phone and turned to Marcus and Jordan. "Your father's jet is en route. It'll land at the fixed base operator on the north side of the airport in about 80 minutes. I've arranged a car to take you there. In the meantime, please, and I know this is asking a lot after what just happened, would you be willing to wait in the Diamond Lounge? I need to contain this situation, and having you here is only going to generate more attention." Marcus looked at the crowd, at the phones still recording, at Brandon Miller's TikTok stream that was now approaching 200,000 live viewers. "He's right. Let's go." The Diamond Lounge was on the upper level of Concourse B, accessible only by elevator and hidden behind frosted glass doors that bore the Horizon Royal logo in brushed platinum. The greeter at the entrance, a young woman whose name tag read Sophia, took one look at Marcus and Jordan and went pale. "Mr. Hayes, sirs, please come in. Anything you need, anything at all. Just water and a quiet corner. Of course. Right this way." The lounge was nearly empty at this hour, just a handful of early morning travelers spread across leather armchairs and charging stations. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the tarmac, where planes sat in neat rows, their navigation lights blinking in the pre-dawn darkness. Sophia brought bottled water, San Pellegrino, the expensive kind, and a selection of pastries that neither brother touched. She hovered for a moment, clearly wanting to say something but unsure if she should. "I'm sorry." The words came out in a rush. "For what happened? I heard about it. Happened. Everyone's heard about it. Patricia, she shouldn't have done that. No, she shouldn't have." Sophia left them alone after that, retreating to the reception desk and speaking in hushed tones to another employee who kept glancing over at the brothers with wide eyes. Jordan sank into one of the leather chairs and pulled out his phone. The screen was still cracked, but it worked well enough to scroll through the explosion of notifications. Twitter was on fire. TikTok was trending 3 different hashtags related to the incident. Instagram was flooded with clips from Brandon's live stream, each one captioned with outrage and calls for accountability. "We're famous." Jordan's voice was flat. "We're a cautionary tale." "Same thing." "No, it's not." Marcus leaned back, closing his eyes. "A cautionary tale is supposed to teach people something." "I'm not sure anyone's learning anything here." The investigation into Patricia Moore's employment history took less than 4 hours. Andrew Foster, fueled by panic and the very real fear of losing his own job, had mobilized an entire team to comb through 6 years of personnel records, passenger complaints, and incident reports. What they found was damning in its consistency. Patricia had filed 47 security concerns in 6 years. 47 passengers flagged as threats, denied boarding, or removed from flights. The pattern was impossible to ignore. 39 of the 47 were people of color. 32 involved passengers who were dressed casually despite holding premium tickets. 18 resulted in police involvement, and in every single case, Patricia had been cleared by her supervisors because the passengers in question had eventually left without escalating the situation. They'd left because they had to. Because fighting meant missing flights, losing money, risking arrest. They'd left because the system was designed to make them leave. But there was something else in the files, something Foster hadn't expected to find. Patricia had been selling seats. The scheme was simple but effective. When VIP blocks appeared on the manifest, seats held for executives, board members, or corporate travelers who might or might not show up. Patricia would wait until close to departure time. If the VIP hadn't checked in, she'd release the seat and assign it to someone willing to pay cash. Usually friends, sometimes strangers who approached her with the right offer. She'd pocket the money, delete the transaction from the system as best she could, and hope the VIP never showed up. It had worked for 2 years, 94 incidents, nearly $95,000 in unreported revenue. Until Marcus and Jordan Hayes walked up to her counter. Foster stared at the spreadsheet on his laptop, his coffee going cold in the cup beside him. The sun had risen fully now, flooding his office with pale November light that did nothing to warm the chill spreading through his chest. He picked up the phone and dialed Victor's direct line. "Mr. Chairman, we found something." Victor listened in silence as Foster explained. When the station manager finished, there was a long pause. "Criminal charges, federal if possible, wire fraud, theft, falsification of records, and Andrew, yes, sir, find out who knew. Someone had to have seen this. Someone had to have noticed the pattern. If they stayed silent, I want them gone too." "Understood." Foster hung up and immediately dialed the FBI field office in Denver. This was beyond corporate discipline now. This was a federal crime, and it was about to become a very public one. Patricia Moore was arrested at 2:15 that afternoon in the employee break room. She'd been told to stay on site pending the investigation, and she'd spent the intervening hours in a small windowless room, alternating between crying and trying to call her union representative. When the 2 FBI agents walked in, both in dark suits, both carrying credentials that glinted under the fluorescent lights, Patricia knew it was over. "Patricia Moore, you're under arrest for wire fraud, theft of services, falsification of corporate records, and conspiracy to defraud. You have the right to remain silent." The rest of the Miranda warning blurred into background noise as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. They were tight, not painfully so, but enough that she couldn't forget they were there. Enough that when they walked her out through the terminal, past the gates and the shops and the thousands of travelers who stopped to stare, she felt the weight of every decision that had led her to this moment. Someone took a photo, then another, then a dozen. By the time she reached the waiting police cruiser, Patricia Moore's perp walk was already going viral. The FBI's forensic accounting team found the digital trail within 72 hours. Patricia had been careful, but not careful enough. Every seat reassignment left a timestamp in the Horizon Royal system. Every cash transaction, while not recorded in the airline's ledgers, had created gaps in the manifest logs that were visible once someone knew where to look. And once the investigators started pulling security footage from the terminal cameras, they found something even more damning. Patricia meeting with passengers in quiet corners of the concourse, accepting envelopes, shaking hands. 94 incidents over 24 months. 18 involved seats that had been blocked for corporate executives. 12 involved accessibility accommodations that had been reassigned to able-bodied passengers willing to pay. 7 involved military personnel traveling on bereavement leave who'd been told their reservations had been canceled due to overbooking. The FBI didn't just find a pattern of theft, they found a pattern of cruelty. Special Agent Diane Foster, no relation to Andrew, sat in the interrogation room at the Denver field office with Patricia's file spread across the table. She was 53, gray-haired, and had spent 26 years prosecuting white-collar crime. She'd seen embezzlers, fraudsters, and corporate thieves of every variety. But something about this case made her jaw tighten in a way that surprised her. "Tell me about Sergeant Marcus Thompson." Patricia looked up from her lap, where her hands were clasped so tightly the knuckles had gone white. "I don't know who that is." Agent Foster slid a photograph across the table. A black man in his early 40s, military dress uniform, chest full of ribbons. He was smiling in the photo, but there was something tired in his eyes. June 14th, 2022. He had a reservation on flight RH217 to Atlanta. His father had just died and he was flying home for the funeral. You told him the reservation had been canceled due to overbooking. Then you gave his seat to a couple who paid you $800 cash. Patricia's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. He missed the funeral, missed saying goodbye. His family blamed him for not being there. Do you understand what that does to a person? It was a mistake. The words came out barely above a whisper. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Agent Foster pulled out another photograph. Dr. Rachel Green, medical researcher. Traveling to a conference in Boston where she was supposed to present findings that could have secured a $250,000 research grant. You removed her from the flight, told her there was an issue with her credentials. She missed the conference, lost the grant. Her career stalled for 2 years. Another photo, Carlos Rodriguez, missed his sister's wedding because you sold his seat. His sister still won't speak to him. She thinks he chose not to come. Another, Barbara Washington, 67 years old, wheelchair user. You gave her accessible seat to someone else and told her the plane didn't have the equipment to accommodate her. She tried to board anyway, fell, and needed hip surgery. Another, David Mitchell, detained for 6 hours after you reported him as suspicious because he was checking his phone too frequently. He missed a job interview for a position that would have changed his life. Patricia was crying openly now, mascara streaking down her face in dark rivulets. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, I just needed the money, my daughter's tuition, the mortgage, I was drowning. You weren't drowning. Agent Foster's voice was sharp. You were making $72,000 a year plus benefits. You owned a 3-bedroom house in Littleton. Your daughter went to private school. You weren't drowning. You were greedy. She closed the file and leaned back in her chair. And when Marcus and Jordan Hayes showed up at your counter, you didn't just see 2 passengers, you saw 2 seats you'd already sold to Eleanor Van Derlen. You had to get rid of them before they could scan their boarding passes and expose your entire operation. Patricia's shoulders shook with sobs, but Agent Foster wasn't finished. So you called them thugs. You weaponized their skin color and their clothing to make everyone around you believe they were the threat. You turned a flight full of passengers into your personal jury and you used the police as your executioners. And if they'd been anyone else, anyone without the resources to fight back, you would have gotten away with it. The silence that followed was broken only by Patricia's ragged breathing. "I want a lawyer." Agent Foster stood, gathering her files. "You're going to need one." The story broke nationally on the third day. CNN picked it up first, running a segment during the morning news that featured clips from Brandon Miller's TikTok live stream interspersed with interviews from aviation industry experts. By noon, it was the lead story on every major network. By evening, it had spawned a congressional inquiry. Representative James Whitfield, a Democrat from California who chaired the House Transportation Committee, held a press conference on the steps of the Capitol. He was 61, silver-haired, and had built a career on holding corporations accountable for systemic failures. What happened to Marcus and Jordan Hayes is unconscionable. But what's even more disturbing is that this wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern, a culture, and it happened because Horizon Royal Airlines and the aviation industry as a whole failed to implement basic safeguards against discrimination. He announced hearings scheduled for the following month. He promised subpoenas. He used words like systemic racism and corporate accountability and zero tolerance. And by the time he finished speaking, Horizon Royal's stock had dropped 11%. Victor Hayes watched the press conference from his office on the 47th floor of the Apex Global building in Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the East River, and the late afternoon sun turned the water into molten gold. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the boats move through the harbor, and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Not because Patricia Moore was being prosecuted. Not because the media was finally paying attention to something that had been happening for decades, but because his sons had handled it exactly right. They'd stayed calm. They'd documented everything. They'd given the system every opportunity to correct itself before he'd intervened. And when the system had failed, as he'd known it would, they hadn't gloated. They'd simply called him and asked for help. His assistant knocked on the doorframe. "Mr. Hayes, the board is ready for you." The emergency meeting of Horizon Royal's board of directors took place via video conference. 15 faces filled the screen mounted on Victor's wall, each one representing billions in assets and decades of industry experience. They looked worried. They had reason to be. Victor didn't sit down. He stood in front of the camera, hands in his pockets, and waited for the CEO, Michael Bradford, 62, who'd been with the company for 18 years, to open the discussion. "Victor," Bradford's voice was careful, measured. "We need to talk about the Denver incident." "The Denver incident." Victor repeated the words slowly, tasting them. "Is that what we're calling it?" "We're calling it a crisis." Bradford leaned forward, and his image pixelated slightly before resolving. "Stock is down 11%. We've had 6,000 cancellations in the last 48 hours. The FAA is launching an investigation. Congress is threatening hearings. We need a strategy. I have a strategy." Victor's voice was calm. "Fire everyone involved. Implement mandatory bias training for all 43,000 employees. Establish an independent oversight committee to review all passenger complaints. And compensate every single person Patricia Moore victimized over the last 6 years." The board members shifted uncomfortably in their respective frames. One of them, Sandra Liu, 58, representing a major pension fund, spoke up. "Victor, with all due respect, we're talking about millions of dollars in legal fees, settlements, retraining costs. The financial impact could be catastrophic. The financial impact of doing nothing will be worse." Victor's gaze swept across the screen, meeting each board member's eyes in turn. "Right now, we're a story. In 6 months, if we don't act decisively, we'll be a case study in corporate negligence. Every business school in America will use us as an example of what not to do." Another board member spoke up. Thomas Green, 64, old guard aviation industry, the kind of man who still referred to flight attendants as stewardesses. We can't let one incident dictate policy for an entire airline. It's not one incident. Victor's voice sharpened. It's 94 incidents. It's 6 years of systematic theft and discrimination. It's a culture that allowed a gate agent to believe she could profile passengers based on their appearance and face no consequences. And it happened under your watch. Green's face flushed, but he didn't respond. Bradford cleared his throat. What are you proposing? I'm proposing we do the right thing. Victor pulled out a chair and sat down for the first time, leaning toward the camera. We acknowledge the failure. We apologize publicly. We implement reforms that actually mean something. And we prove to our customers and to the world that this company is better than its worst employee. And if the board doesn't agree? Victor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then I remind you that I own 78% of this company. I can make these changes with or without your support, but I'd prefer to do it together. The vote was unanimous. Michael Bradford announced his resignation the following morning, citing personal reasons and the need for fresh leadership. Victor didn't accept it immediately. He let Bradford sweat for 48 hours before naming Michelle Roberts as the new CEO. Roberts was 49, a former civil rights attorney who'd spent 15 years at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund before transitioning to corporate consulting. She was brilliant, uncompromising, and exactly the kind of person who would terrify the old guard into compliance. Her first act as CEO was to fly to Denver and meet with every employee who'd worked at the airport in the last 6 years. Not just gate agents. Everyone. Baggage handlers, ticketing staff, lounge attendants, maintenance crews. She held town halls that lasted 6 hours. She listened to complaints, took notes, and made it clear that the culture was changing whether people liked it or not. Her second act was to personally call every one of Patricia Moore's 47 victims and offer compensation. Not settlements with non-disclosure agreements. Actual compensation with full transparency and public apologies. Sergeant Marcus Thompson received a check for $50,000 and a handwritten letter from Roberts that ended with the words, "Your father's service meant something. Your grief mattered. We failed you, and I'm sorry." Dr. Rachel Green received $75,000 and a commitment from Horizon Royal to sponsor her research for the next 5 years. Carlos Rodriguez received $25,000 and a pair of first-class tickets to visit his sister, along with a letter Roberts had written to the sister explaining what had actually happened. The calls took 3 weeks. Roberts made every single one herself. By the time she finished, the media narrative had shifted from scandal to redemption. But the criminal case was just beginning. The trial of Patricia Moore began on a cold morning in January, 6 weeks after her arrest. The federal courthouse in Denver was a brutalist concrete structure that looked like it had been designed to intimidate, and it succeeded. Patricia arrived in a gray pantsuit that hung loose on her frame. She'd lost weight in custody and kept her eyes on the ground as reporters shouted questions she didn't answer. The prosecution's case was devastating in its simplicity. They had the transaction logs, they had the security footage, they had testimony from 47 victims who'd flown to Denver to confront the woman who'd stolen from them, humiliated them, and in some cases destroyed opportunities they'd never get back. Sergeant Thompson took the stand on the third day. He wore his dress uniform, and when he spoke about missing his father's funeral, his voice cracked only once. "I blamed myself for years. I thought I'd done something wrong, that I'd made a mistake with the reservation or showed up too late or, I don't know, something. It wasn't until the FBI called me that I learned the truth." The defense attorney, a public defender named Samuel Ortiz, who looked exhausted before the trial even began, tried to argue diminished capacity, financial pressure, a culture of corner-cutting at Horizon Royal that had pressured Patricia into making bad choices. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They returned with guilty verdicts on all counts. Judge Amanda Chen, 61, appointed to the federal bench by 3 presidents, zero tolerance for white-collar crime, sentenced Patricia to 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. She also ordered restitution in the amount of $94,800 plus interest to be paid to the victims upon release. Ms. Moore, you violated the trust of every passenger who stepped into that airport. You weaponized your authority to steal, to discriminate, and to destroy. The fact that you targeted vulnerable populations makes your crimes even more egregious. I hope you use your time in prison to reflect on the harm you've caused. Patricia was led away in handcuffs. The courtroom emptied slowly, victims lingering to speak with prosecutors, reporters filing stories on laptops balanced on their knees. Marcus and Jordan sat in the back row through the entire trial. They didn't testify. They didn't need to. But they were there every day, a silent reminder of what had started the investigation. On the final day, as they were leaving the courthouse, Sergeant Thompson approached them. He was in civilian clothes now, jeans and a flannel shirt, and he looked older than his 42 years. I wanted to thank you. If you hadn't had the resources to fight back, none of this would have happened. We'd still be just numbers in her ledger. Marcus shook his hand. We didn't do this alone. All 47 of you mattered. Your stories mattered. Thompson nodded, blinking against tears he was too proud to shed in public. Still, thank you. He walked away and Jordan watched him go with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. You think it changes anything? Jordan's voice was quiet. The trial, the prison sentence, all of it. Does it actually change anything? I don't know, but it's better than nothing. The trial of Officer Derek Walsh and Kyle Torres happened 2 weeks later. Walsh faced federal charges of assault and civil rights violations. Torres faced charges of conspiracy and aiding and abetting. Both had been fired from their respective positions within hours of the Denver incident, but the criminal case required more than just employment termination. Walsh's body camera footage was the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. It showed Marcus standing still, hands visible, asking calmly to be allowed to leave voluntarily. It showed Walsh misinterpreting that calm as defiance and responding with force. It showed the moment Marcus's head hit the door frame, the blood, the dragging. The defense argued that Walsh had been following standard protocols for passenger removal, that Marcus had been non-compliant, that the use of force was justified given the circumstances. The jury watched the footage 7 times. They convicted Walsh on all counts. Judge Chen sentenced him to 3 years in federal prison. Mr. Walsh, you were given a badge and the authority to protect people. You used that authority to brutalize a man whose only crime was trying to board a plane he'd paid for. That is unacceptable in a civilized society. Torres received 18 months and a permanent ban from working in any security capacity in the state of Colorado. Captain Robert Garrison didn't face criminal charges. His punishment came from the Federal Aviation Administration, which revoked his commercial pilot's license permanently after a hearing that lasted less than 2 hours. The FAA examiner who delivered the decision didn't mince words. Captain Garrison, you demonstrated a fundamental lack of judgment and an unwillingness to verify facts before making decisions that affected the safety and dignity of your passengers. You are no longer fit to command an aircraft. Garrison left the hearing in silence. He'd spent 32 years flying. It was the only thing he knew how to do, and now it was gone. He applied for jobs at regional carriers, at cargo companies, at flight schools. Everyone turned him down. The viral video had made him unemployable in aviation. By March, he was working at a FedEx distribution center in Aurora, loading boxes onto trucks for $17 an hour. Eleanor Van Derlin settled her civil lawsuit with Marcus and Jordan for $2 million. The settlement came with a requirement that she issue a public apology, which she read from a prepared statement in front of cameras she clearly despised. I made assumptions based on appearance. I was wrong. I am deeply sorry for my role in this incident. She sold her Manhattan penthouse 3 months later. The real estate listing didn't mention why. Her friends at the country club stopped returning her calls. Her husband's law firm quietly removed her from their client list, citing conflicts of interest. By summer, she'd moved to a townhouse in suburban New Jersey and started shopping at grocery stores where nobody recognized her. Richard Stanton, the regional vice president who'd enabled Patricia's behavior by never investigating the pattern of complaints against her, faced his own reckoning. He was indicted on charges of corporate fraud and obstruction of justice for deliberately ignoring red flags in personnel reviews. His trial was scheduled for September. In the meantime, Horizon Royal's internal investigation found 12 other employees who'd known about Patricia's scheme and stayed silent. All 12 were terminated. 4 faced criminal charges. The cultural shift at Horizon Royal happened faster than anyone expected. Michelle Roberts implemented a zero-tolerance policy that fired 3 more employees in the first month for discriminatory behavior. She installed body cameras for all security personnel working in Horizon Royal terminals. She created an anonymous reporting app that allowed passengers to flag concerns in real time, with responses guaranteed within 4 hours. Discrimination complaints dropped 68% in the first 6 months. But the real change happened in how people talked about the incident. It became a case study at Harvard Business School, at Wharton, at Stanford. It became a reference point in congressional hearings about corporate accountability. It became shorthand for what happens when systemic failures collide with individual courage. And it became the catalyst for federal legislation. Representative Whitfield introduced the Passenger Dignity Act in March. It required all airlines operating in the United States to implement independent bias auditing, mandatory body cameras for security personnel, and standardized protocols for passenger complaints. It passed the House with bipartisan support. It passed the Senate in May. The president signed it into law in June, standing in the Rose Garden with Marcus and Jordan Hayes as witnesses. The world hasn't always been fair to people who look like you. The president's voice carried across the assembled crowd of reporters, advocates, and airline executives. But today, because of your courage and your father's refusal to let injustice stand, we're making it a little bit fairer. Marcus shook the president's hand and said nothing. The cameras flashed. The pens scratched on notebooks. The story wrote itself. But that night, sitting in a hotel room in Washington with Jordan sprawled across the other bed scrolling through his phone, Marcus felt the weight of everything that had happened settle onto his shoulders like a physical thing. You ever wonder if it was worth it? Jordan looked up, surprised. Worth what? All of this. The trial, the media, the law. Patricia's in prison, Walsh is in prison, Garrison lost his license, Eleanor lost her penthouse. But there are 1,000 other Patricias out there, 1,000 other people who'll see someone like us and decide we don't belong. Jordan set his phone down and was quiet for a long moment. Yeah, there are. But now those 1,000 people know what happens if they get caught. And that's something. Is it enough? It's more than we had 6 months ago. Marcus nodded slowly. He wanted to believe that. He wanted to believe that the system could change, that the Passenger Dignity Act would mean something, that the next person who walked up to a first-class counter in a hoodie wouldn't face what they'd faced. But belief required faith, and faith required evidence, and the evidence was still being written. 2 years and 6 months after the Denver incident, Marcus returned to the same airport. He wore the same gray hoodie, the same cargo pants, the same beanie. He carried the same battered duffel bag. He could have traveled in a suit, could have made it easy for everyone, but he wanted to see if anything had actually changed. He approached the first-class counter at 6:43 in the morning. the exact time he and Jordan had arrived that November day. The agent behind the counter was young, mid-20s, black, female, and when she saw him, her eyes widened in recognition. "Mr. Hayes, welcome back." She smiled, genuine and warm, and there was no hesitation in her voice. "Let me get you checked in." She scanned his boarding pass without asking for ID. She didn't comment on his clothes. She didn't call security. She treated him like any other passenger, and when she handed him the receipt, she met his eyes. "Have a wonderful flight, sir. And thank you." "For what?" "For making this place better." Marcus walked toward the gate, and halfway there he saw a family. Latina mother, young son, maybe 10 years old, both dressed in jeans and t-shirts, standing nervously near the Diamond Lounge entrance. The greeter was questioning them, asking for membership verification, and the mother was fumbling with her phone, stress etched into every line of her face. Marcus changed direction. "Excuse me, is there a problem?" The greeter turned, saw Marcus, and her expression shifted immediately. "Mr. Hayes." No problem. I was just verifying." "Then let them in." Marcus's voice was quiet but carried weight. "And if there's any issue with their access, put it on my account." The greeter stepped aside. The mother looked at Marcus with tears in her eyes, whispering thank you in a voice that shook. The boy stared up at him with wide eyes, clutching a science fair trophy that explained why they were traveling first class. Marcus knelt down to the boy's level. "What's your name?" "Daniel." "Well, Daniel, congratulations on winning. Where are you headed?" "National finals. In Chicago." The boy's voice was small but proud. Marcus pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to the mother. "If anyone questions you, if anyone makes you feel like you don't belong, you call that number. Understand?" The mother nodded, clutching the card like a lifeline. Marcus stood and walked away. He didn't look back. He didn't need the recognition or the gratitude. He just needed to know that the next person wouldn't have to fight alone. He boarded the plane and took his seat in economy, 1C, middle row, not first class, by choice. The flight attendant recognized him and started to say something, but Marcus shook his head gently. "I like the view from here. Reminds me where I came from." The plane pushed back on time. The engines spooled up. Denver fell away beneath him, the Rocky Mountains rising in the distance, snow-capped and eternal. Jordan had asked if it was enough. Marcus still didn't know the answer, but he knew it was more than silence, more than acceptance, more than letting the Patricias of the world win by default. Real power, his father had once told him, isn't about what you can do to people, it's about what you can do for people, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough.